I'll ask anybody's question but yours. You're an idiot. And really a disloyal person.
Hello and welcome to this edition of This Confers Looping.
I'll ask anybody's question but yours.
Hey, we're back. Guess what's going on? We're doing another episode of Disloyal Idiots, a Fans for Sportsnet production. Apologies for the technical difficulties. For some reason, it defaults to looping the intro music, which I need to work on. I will take my penance and figure this out by next week. No, I won't. Who am I kidding? I'm Steve Haller, with you as always. Joining me, the illustrious Christian de Guzman and Andy Pregler. What's going on, guys?
Well, we didn't open the season with a Week 0 Europe game, so it's pretty good.
Fair enough. We are staying in the States and not having even more ridiculous travel than the proposed ACC would have.
We are 2 years away from our Chick-fil-A Labor Day weekend kickoff against, or wait, is it? Yeah, it's Labor Day, right?
Probably, but at least it won't be a Week 0 game.
Well, if we do Labor Day away, then we don't have to battle the fair crowd like they always seem to care about, and we could do it in like Hungary or something, and we'll be fine. It's great.
Plus, if dome renovations get pushed back, there's a higher likelihood that the dome scoreboard won't be hanging by Walter the crane.
Oh God, that's great.
I mean, listen, it's Vandy and Hawaii have played a home and home series now, where I'm pretty sure it has not been at a real stadium for either game. So shout out to the weirdest home and home that could possibly exist. Good old Syracuse friend Clark. How do you say his last name? Last name again is Leah.
I don't know. That guy.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, that Vandy job. Whew, it's something.
Yeah,
we should probably talk about
soon. TM.
We could actually get into that. When it's time for the the JMA Dome renovations to take place, Vanderbilt is actually a really interesting comparison point. But that is a conversation for another day.
Well, we did have. I was in Toronto this weekend. And they do the same thing up there. It's always the Sky Dome. It doesn't matter that it's the Rogers Center and has been for God knows how long at this point. It's still the Sky Dome. So we've at least got plenty of time to still call it the Carrier Dome.
I mean, Lakers fans, Clippers fans, if they exist, and LA Kings fans are going to call it the Staples Center.
Clippers fans exist sometimes if the team's fine.
Point being, there was a 0.5% part of the population who calls it the crypto.com arena or whatever the hell it's called now.
Oh God, yeah,
that's gonna be a great trivia question in 10 years from now.
In chat also, Andy's favorite stadium, the Ketchup Field.
Yes.
Oh yeah. No, we're not talking about Saudi oil money here. Then we're really gonna get off topic.
Flying the steel. You know what, Andy? We should get you crossing over with Behind the Steel Curtain, the Fans for Sportsnet Steelers podcast, and see how far you guys can go off topic.
Oh, it can go incredibly far off topic. That's what I can say.
There you go.
But in order to get let's bring this thing back around, because it is the official college football season. This is our preview show for the season. For those of you who maybe are joining us for the first time, and it's really cool. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for taking a listen. I promise we're actually going to talk about Syracuse things. Typically during the football season, we do an hour-long show on Sunday nights, the week of a Syracuse football game. The first half hour, we talk about what happened in the game previous. The second half hour, we talk about the game that's upcoming. Obviously, this week, there was no game that took place for Syracuse during Week 0, but there is a game against Colgate that's happening this Saturday at 3:30. Really awesome. Colgate is not necessarily an FCS team that we need to go in depth on, so I think what's going to happen is this is going to be our season preview show. It was season preview week around the parts of nunesmagician.com. And I know that we have all participated in various different ways to the football previewing that has taken place here. I think the first question that needs to be asked is how, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most and 1 being the least, how optimistic are you that Syracuse makes a bowl game for the second straight season for the first time since the Doug Marrone era at Syracuse?
Ironically, I'm at a solid 44%.
I'll opt for former football lineman numbers and go 73%.
I'm on the high side as well. I actually have a side bet with a friend that I will get into in a minute here about how optimistic I am about this team, weirdly. But Christian, let's start with you with why I do think that if we were to have our friend Matt Glod here, for also known as Hoya Suksa, who is very good with computers and math, he would show that the range of outcomes for this year's team is probably one of the widest that I have seen in modern Syracuse eras. Like, I think that there is a legitimate path for this team to go anywhere from 3 wins to 9 wins, all within like reasonable amounts of outcome. We're not like those extremes are well within play. Why are you feeling more towards less wins on that scale as opposed to Steve and I, who are, I think, a little bit more optimistic on the scale of potential outcomes?
It just goes back to the trend of what we've talked about for the past 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Keep counting on however many years you want in the past. It goes back to the same thing that has kind of defined the success of every Syracuse football season, and that is the strength of the offensive line. We have no idea how this offensive line is going to play, and given some of the reports coming out of camp on who potentially is and is not starting, it makes me even more concerned. Now, if there was more stability based on the reports coming out of camp from the reporters there, that there is a more of consensus, I should say, based on who the starting offensive line is. It's just a consensus. I'm not necessarily saying like it's got to be the starting 5 that I think should be out there, but if there was some sort of consensus
I would take
agreement,
consensus on 2 positions.
exactly, an agreement from what we've seen between the starters on the offensive line, especially for a line that's replacing a
let's go into that a little bit.
An offensive line that's replacing a for surefire second round pick, and potential and was a borderline first round pick in Matthew Bergeron, and a incredibly solid starting center and Carlos Federello, and also a serviceable, solid right side guard / tackle in Dakota Davis. This is an offensive line that's replacing 3 starters at minimum from last year.
Yeah.
And from what we've seen from the camp stories, and I'm talking about the projected depth charts we've seen from Syracuse.com's Emily Leichler and from Syracuse Fan Nation's Mike McAllister, both of those projected starting offensive lines look very, very different. And those 2 are at pretty much all the fall ball practices.
Right.
So,
they're
and
the most tight end of anyone.
And so for those 2 to come to very different conclusions about what exactly is the starting 5, first of all, should be a little bit worrying. Secondly, the reason why I say that is, let's go back to what the original point is. Why am I at 44% on to make a bowl this year? Because we've already seen, just in general, it almost really doesn't matter how much talent Syracuse has at quarterback or at the skill positions, especially when it comes to offensive production. It really matters on how well the offensive line holds up. Because you take a look at a year like 2019, where it felt like in recent memory, that was one of the years where Syracuse had the most skill in terms of its skill positions, with guys like Tristan Jackson and a pretty good backcourt in Abdul Adams. I believe Mo Neal was still kicking around, or I could be wrong there. But still, it was a good year for skill positions. However, that Syracuse team went 5-7 because the offensive line completely collapsed, and Tommy DeVito got shelled every single game. And
politely,
yeah, and when you look at the year prior, Tristan Jackson didn't play the entire year at wide receiver. You could make a clear argument in 2018 that the running back and wide receiver talent wasn't nearly as high. And yes, you had Eric Dungy, who was in his senior year. But because that offensive line held strong, that offense performed admirably well. And so it just feels like every single year, no matter when we're talking about Syracuse football, we talk about the offensive line. We talk about the strength of the offensive line. We talk about the consistency of having the same guys out there on the offensive line in a healthy manner. And so, that all being said, it's going to be very, very important for Syracuse and just for fans in general, just to see the same guys out there and to see them in the same positions, and to see none of the injuries that we've seen, that we've unfortunately grown accustomed to with Syracuse. Because if this line starts to falter, then because there's a lot of people who agree with Steve and Andy, who are on the positive side of Syracuse making it a bowl. And I would be more too if I didn't have so many questions about the strength of the trenches, especially on the offensive side.
I think that that's incredibly valid. I do think the schedule plays into Syracuse's favor in that regard, with a game against a Colgate team that is not an FCS power, and a game against a Western Michigan that I didn't realize until doing some research and listening to some other people who know the MAC a lot better than I did. I didn't realize that Western Michigan is in the middle of a full program teardown. Like, they are rebuilding that program from the studs up. Not to say that, it's, any given Saturday, anything can happen. But we saw a 5-7 Syracuse team take on a really solid Ohio team in the MAC and win handily in the past with a poor offensive line. So I'm with you, where I don't necessarily think that my opinion on the offensive line is flipped where, oh my gosh, I think it's great. I do think that they have 2 full games to play around and figure some stuff out before they play their first real test in Purdue. And I think that does, in past years, we were joking about this before we got on the show, is like, when does Syracuse play the International Week 0 game? In past years, Syracuse would attempt to do some version of that, where we're playing on the road in week 1, or we're playing a pretty big non-conference game in week 2. This year, the non-conference schedule is about as soft as you can get. And I do think that when you're looking at what Syracuse needs to work through, a lot of it, especially on the offensive line, is we're talking about 8 guys, and there's 5 spots. And we want the best 5 guys out there that make the best unit. And Steve, I know you've talked about this a lot, and I'm going to queuing you up here. We saw last year a bunch of players who are not locked in starters for this year, who we would have thought would have been that in that position. And outside of Cruz, I don't think that anybody really has a firm spot on this offensive line in like left, right, or center outside of him, because we've seen a lot of movement. The depth charts are showing a lot of movement. I think that they probably have a decent idea, and Dino might just be being Dino and showing stupid things in the 10 minutes that media has access to the program. But this isn't a situation where the guys that we're talking through haven't seen the field before.
True. Now, at the same time, the only names, well, I guess I guess, yeah, everybody, even if we're playing musical chairs, like the two quote unquote projected depth charts from the two reporters, between Emily and Mike, that have seen anything, you're looking at all people that do have experience playing a decent level of college football. Enrique Cruz is the only consistency. Chris Bleich starting somewhere is a consistency. The fact that there's a possibility for Kalen Ellis to be benched seems very disconcerting. The fact that Joe Moore, who I don't know, I only saw very limited reps of him in the spring and or anything that we've gotten video of at tackle, and he looked like a revolving door, but that could have also been when I saw him. You've got Wollabaugh Jr. who's coming in. Like, there's a lot of guys. Like, Moore had a great career at Richmond. He should be better than what we saw in those clips in the spring. So there's folks that have, even Gianre Reed, who is possibly challenging Josh Aloha as the center, was an NJCAA champion last year at center. So there's a good bit of at least experience playing at a college football level, maybe not high level ACC all the way around, but there's at least bodies that have seen the field in a significantly upgraded level from what they would have seen in high school or on the practice field. You also have Jacob Bradford, who saw a bunch of time for us last year. You have Ellis, hopefully somewhere in that starting lineup, because that's a big ass body to not be putting on the field. And then the other names tossed around are Wes Ho, Mark Petrie, and Joe Cruz, who Ho saw plenty of time at fullback and or tight end, which not the same, but at least getting game speed reps. So there's things that are a lot of question marks around the program right now, or especially around the offensive line. But yeah, I get why that is kind of a flux point between what you and I are thinking and what Christian's thinking. Like, there's valid reasons for both.
And let's also remember, when's the last time we had this much turnover and upheaval and rebuilding on the offensive line? It was that 2019 year.
Yeah. Though I would argue, as someone who pays too much attention to the shit, that this group may be better than what we had coming back in 2019. We probably, or maybe we lost more in 2019.
Yeah, that's true.
And the delta is more. It's not so much like this may be about as talented as what we had, but the delta from where we were is significantly more in 2018 to 2019.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Steve, why are you a bit more optimistic? Naturally, you're concerned about the line, but maybe not the same level as concern. But what about this team is giving you reasons for optimism?
You haven't noticed after the 10 years the last 10 years that I tend to be the optimist?
I mean, I just can't say Steve's generally more optimistic than us. That's not good podcast.
He's optimistic, but he usually does have backup, which, okay. Receiver depth is better than we've had. The quality at running back may drop off, but it's a very different quality. Like, going from Sean Tucker to anyone is going to be a drop. The question is like what we can do with that drop, and I feel like we can utilize LaQuinn Allen quite well, assuming he's back in at 100. Even if he's not, the depth in the running back room is there, the depth in the quarterback room is there, unlike things we've seen in a long time. Also on defense, we have, and again, if you've been listening more than a week, I'll just rail on depth to no avail. But on the defensive end, we have very deep rooms in all three positions. Linebackers, pure bodies may not be deep, but bodies that have had experience are relatively deep. So I just feel a general confidence that we can at least pull off a couple of 50-50s and throw it in the right direction. Because like you said, I mean, it's when you look down at the schedule, it's not as, it's the same thing we always talk about. It's not as bad as what people would think for relatively light non-con, likely 3-1, possible 4-0. The road trip to Purdue is what it is. You've got the stupid stretch, and then you've got a literal bunch of toss-up games. Like,
yeah,
what are you going to do with these 5?
Yeah, this to me is like where the make or break stretch of the season is, and why I'm optimistic. Like, if you even go up one more game, like there's a part of me that is looking at that Florida State game. Like, that's probably the one guaranteed take the hard L. Jared Verse is going to destroy this offensive line. No disrespect to anybody there. It's just Jared Verse might be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft this year. Like, he's scary good, scary disruptive, and he's also got that, from upstate New York, you didn't recruit me. Those guys tend to do really well against their hometown P5 team. I like that game is the one I'm writing off as an L. But Dabo, for whatever reason, struggles against Syracuse, and that game is positioned really nicely after the Army home game. It's Orange Central, so it's guaranteed to be a sellout. So all the ingredients are there for.
You can pause there. It's guaranteed to be a sellout because Clemson's coming. Like,
well, yes,
and it isn't guaranteed to be a Syracuse sellout. It's guaranteed to be Orange sellout.
Well, I was going to say,
who has more fans at that game? Who has more fans? Is it going to be Syracuse and Clemson in that game, or is it going to be what happened last night in Harrison, New Jersey?
No, it's going to be, well, that's what I mean about the Orange Central thing, is that because it's Orange Central, there's just going to be a bunch of Syracuse people there. Are they like going to be the diehard, like super scream your lungs out fans? No, but that's like the one game where the Dome is majority actually Syracuse fans, which is kind of crazy, but I'm glad it worked out the way it did, even though the schedule doesn't have a home game in the entire month of October. But yeah, that UNC road game is weird. And then if you scroll down, like further down, like if you're watching on the Twitch, Steve has the schedule up on the screen because we are getting fancy here. And so that's why I'm referencing the scrolling down. But I even
put up a nice tweet from one of our folks on Twitch. Whatever. I looked at the wrong.
No.
That's why we can't have nice things. The perpetual quest for college game day rides on that Clemson game as always.
Well, the problem,
unfortunately, you need Syracuse to hilariously blow out Purdue to have any hope of that happening.
Yep.
Well, that Purdue game's NBC prime time.
Our luck, Christian, is what we're going to do is we'll do that, and then Clemson will somehow falter somewhere. Like, we'll be set up perfectly.
September 30th. Let's take a look at some.
Well, you know who Clemson's playing the week before our game?
Florida State.
They have Florida State. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they'll find a way to lose there, and then.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean.
Game day.
We're not getting game day for Clemson because game day is going to be at the Florida State Clemson game, and they're not going to do Clemson back-to-back weeks. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that day, you have Alabama, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Tennessee.
Nope.
You have LSU, Mississippi.
Nope.
You have Oregon, Stanford.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah. Utah, Oregon State.
Yeah, no. It's Clemson,
right.
FSU. That's a Sharpie game. But yeah, this is the stretch where this is the reason. Like, personally, I think that 8-4 is in play. I think 7 if the team, big caveat, if the team is healthy, and obviously, if Aronde Gatson goes down, if Garrett Schrader goes down, if multiple bodies on the offensive line goes down, or Cruz goes down, take what I'm saying and just throw it into the garbage. But if this team is healthy, 7-5 should be the expectation, and I think 8-4 is in play. And part of this is going to be Dino has to figure out how to win road games, because Virginia Tech is really bad this year. There's just not a lot of talent on that team. They got portaled super hard. They're trying to rebuild through traditional recruiting instead of through the portal. This is the year to get them in Blacksburg. BC might have fired their coach by the time that game rolls around. That Hafley seat is pretty hot, and that game's looking real tough. Pitt games,
he may only end up getting halfway of a season.
Hey, That Pitt game is.
Anyone who's
I'm
listening should
so
just go-
disappointed. I'm
really?
extremely disappointed.
I was just trying to move right on past it.
If anyone is watching this, you should go back to the video and just watch Christian's reaction. Oh boy, here we go.
Christian still has shame for the rest of us because Steve and I have none.
This is bad. I have no qualms with that joke.
The Pitt game that's weird. That's a weird game. Weird stuff happens when Syracuse plays at Yankee Stadium. The turf is going to be terrible.
At least we know the stadium's going to be free, right, guys?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they'll have 2 full weeks of uninterrupted activity to get that turf nice for the football game.
More than two weeks.
210 weeks. Come on.
Oh, geez, sorry. I was like, the baseball season goes until November 1st. Oh, wait, that's only if you're in the playoffs with the Yankees. Will not be. Yeah, that field should be really nice for that game. But it'll be weird in some way. And then, it's going back to like
it may not be at Heinz, but it's Pitt. Like Syracuse Pitt just turns into stupid stuff.
It's going to be 16-7. No idea who wins, but it's going to be 16-7.
It's either going to be 16-7
or it's going to turn into Zane Mahoney versus Nathan Peterman.
Yep.
Still the weirdest game ever. I have a funny story about that game that we'll return to at a later bit. But then the Georgia Tech game, again, they should win that game. They will be favored in that game. It's just that they have to win it on the road. I will also be at that game, so they better win that game. And if they lose it, you know who to blame. And then you have Wake Forest at home. It's like there are 4 ACC wins here. There are probably 5 ACC wins here, which gives you cushion for the Purdue game. It's just about whether or not Dino Babers can get over his winning on the road in the ACC kerfuffle, snafu, whatever you want to call it. That has really dragged this program down against, to borrow the wording of Stephen Godfrey and Bill Connolly, like the cul-de-sac of the ACC. Like Dino just can't win on the road, even against these weird middling to bad teams, with the exception of BC. And they need to change that this year. And that's going to determine whether or not this team goes bowling or whether or not this team, is the surprise ACC team that maybe finishes ranked 25th in the polls. Like that.
The other thing is you talk about the road kerfuffle. We have a road game coming off a bye week.
The double kerfuffle.
Yes. All of your kerfuffles belong to us.
Yeah.
Which also, sorry, one more thing on that I completely forgot. So I got the Bill Steele preview book, which I highly recommend, mostly because it's a college football nerd's dream. But his schedule also shows like, hey, this is when opponents are coming off of a bye week and they're playing you, which is something I don't get why more people don't do. But for Syracuse, North Carolina is coming off of a bye week when we play North Carolina. So that game is, not loving that. Virginia Tech is also coming off of a bye week before that game as well.
So both teams have opportunities for stupid heading into that game.
Perfect.
Yes. But yeah, just wanted to the North Carolina coming off of a bye when we're coming off of playing Clemson feels difficult. But the Virginia Tech one is that feels like both teams will come in perfectly rested to do something stupid.
The other big thing, and like Andy said, it's navigating through the injuries. And what we saw last year is that after that brutal stretch of Clemson, Pitt, Florida State, Notre Dame, not only did Syracuse lose those games, but they came away from those games with a ton of injuries. And not only just injuries, but a lot of wear and tear on those bodies. And so it also does help a little that there is a bye after those games to, as Dino always says, got to get healthy after those games. But Syracuse has to survive those games without the inherent physicality of those three programs getting the better of them. If Syracuse can escape those 3 games, relatively healthy, it sets them up for that back half of the season.
Yep.
Because that back half of the season is, like Andy mentioned, it's where the winnable games are. But me being the internal pessimist in this podcast and on our sister site, newsmagician.com, it's almost too easy to see Syracuse get absolutely beat up during those during that 3-game stretch of Clemson, UNC, FSU, and for the Dino Babers trend of continuing to look less than ideal after a bye week. And that just all spirals the season out of control.
Why'd you have to do that to us?
I mean, but this is, I think we're kind of dancing around the big question that is around this season, which we'll get to in just a second, because it's a good time to leave you hanging, wanting more at halftime, because we're going to talk about our sponsor who always wants you wanting to buy more. Home Field Apparel. Home Field Apparel is once again our sponsor for this football season. We're grateful to partner with Connor and the rest of the great team over there who make the finest, comfiest vintage t-shirts, hoodies, joggers. They make hats now. They make a lot of things. In fact, right now they're running a team mystery box. I guess it's less of a mystery box, but they're just called team boxes. And the idea is that you get something for every season. You get a t-shirt, you get a hoodie, you get a pair of joggers. You also get some really cool extras like a home field fanny pack and a home field koozie, all in these boxes with exclusive t-shirts, hoodies, and joggers only available via those boxes. They're for select teams. So if you're a fan of Ole Miss, Bama, Nebraska, Notre Dame, there's a few more teams in there that are included. Some really great stuff in there, and showing that home field is starting to roll out into more than just your favorite vintage t-shirts. If you want to jump on the bandwagon and join us in rockin' home field, use promo code NUNES, NUNES23, NUNES23 for 15% off your first order at Home Field Apparel.
You know what?
What?
For anyone who's hung around this long and is listening, we do also have something big to announce from our overlords at Fans for Sportsnet.
Yes.
Yes. I forgot to drop this at the top of the pod, so it's it'll unintentionally increase your odds. So if you're a fan of an NFL team, you should probably head over to contest.fansfirstsports.com and fill out for your chance to win. And I'm not kidding here. Your chance to win 4 free tickets to any NFL week game of your choice, up to $5,000. This is not a test. This is not like we're legit throwing this out there. Our gracious overlords at Fans for Sportsnet have put together this giveaway for the entire network, not just the NFL pods. So they've asked us to extend it. The rules are simple. Literally go to contest.fansfirstsports.com, fill it out, and that's it. That's you've been registered to win the 4 free tickets to any NFL Week 1 game. The 3 of us can't win because we get a paycheck from them, so that doesn't qualify us. But all of you listening can throw your name in. Contest ends on September 4th, so feel free to toss a line in there and see if you can test your luck. And I would say some of our fans may be trying to head to some Bills games. That'd be great.
Oh yes, this is we mentioned the Steelers off the top. Now we got to mention the Bills in the middle. The way things go. There, I don't have a good transition for this, but I do think that the big thing around this season that we haven't really talked about on the show is what's going to happen with Dino Babers. I think that we're all in agreement that if this team does not make a bowl game, so if they go 5-7 or worse, Dino is not returning. Whether he's fired, whether he chooses to step away, it just seems really apparent that a losing season this year will mean that Dino Babers does not return. pending something absolutely insane happening with the program that is beyond his control, and then it's up to Wildhack to decide how much of a second chance he gives Dino. I think the real thing here is that, and credit to Brent Axe, who talked about this on his podcast. We know that John Wildhack doesn't typically get out in front of things. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
And yeah, I think that's fair. So what happens if the team goes 6-6 or 5 or 7-5, like right in line with expectations, in a way where, like, if you're going 7-5 or 6-6, you are dropping at least one, if not two, winnable games on the schedule, probably in an annoying fashion. But you're probably good enough that you go, we probably should have won more games. Like, I just can't really see a 6-6 or a 7-5 season being like super impressive. Yeah, let's give Dino another 4 or 5 year extension. But you're kind of stuck at a point where even if you give him a 1 or 2 year extension, you're just playing this game again in next year. And the last piece of news that I'll drop before I shut up and ask you guys' opinions here is that Nate Mink dropped in the Syracuse.com season preview, some really strong words that alluded to the fact that there was some tension between the coaching staff and the athletic administration the last football season, where after the 6-0 start, there was either an expectation or a conversation that extensions would take place for the staff. Those didn't happen, and that played a factor into Tony White and Robert and I leaving the program in the offseason. Again, Mink never outright says it, but the wording there is hard to read any other interpretation. So it feels like going into this year, there's a level of distrust between the coaching staff and the admin. And we know that a bowl is not necessarily a guarantee for an extension, depending on how it happens. And so I'm just curious, like, I am somebody here who is firmly, like, I think I've been on the bandwagon of saying, like, I don't dislike Dino. I just don't know if Dino is the guy to get Syracuse more than what we are right now. And the question that Wildhack has to ask himself is, do you want or think that Syracuse can be more in this ever-changing realm of college athletics? Because if the answer is yes, I think you have to go and try to take a shot with somebody else. But if the answer is no, Dino has gotten you to be a mid-tier ACC program. And if that's what you're okay with on the football side, keep Dino until he wants to leave. I don't really see any other path here other than if he goes 8-4, he's getting the extension. If he goes 5-7 or worse, he's getting fired. Anything in the middle, I have no fucking idea. Do either of you guys have any better idea?
I think I do. And I think, yes, your barriers are clear, like you said, Andy. 8-4 and better, he's getting that extension. Doesn't make the bowl, he gets fired. 6-7, I still think he gets extended, mainly because while there might be better options out there, and this is going to sound weird, Syracuse is probably not in a position to afford those better options. Mainly because there are two big money sinks that are happening on campus right now. The upcoming dome renovations and the football complex renovations / creations / buildings that's happening at the Manly South Campus facilities.
No longer Manly. Literally giant letters that say John Laley Athletic Complex. So
that. So there's a lot of money already in athletics being diverted to those two things. And so if Syracuse goes 6-6 or 7-5, and from what we've seen, and from what Andy alluded to with Nate Mink's reported words or words that he said in Syracuse.com season preview about the report, supposed maybe, who knows, talk of an extension that didn't happen. My extrapolation from that is that it seems like the athletic department is still kind of shell-shocked about the rapid freefall that happened from the 2018 10-3 season to the 2019 5-7 season, which in turn made them a little more weary, a little more careful about immediately, impulsively signing people to an extension after a quote unquote successful season. And couple that with the other big money sinks that are happening right now on campus, it feels like Syracuse would want to play it safe and just keep the status quo, at least until those big facility upgrades come through, and then the money is freed up for other things. And so if Babers just at the minimum makes a bowl, then maybe just out of financial necessity, Syracuse sticks with him.
I think you're right. But Steve, this is something that we've talked about a lot. You can't, it's like that scene of Art Howe and Billy Bean in Moneyball, portrayed by Brad Pitt and the late Hoffman. You can't manage on a 1-year contract. And Babers still, by all accounts, has at least one more year left on his deal. And according to Emily from Syracuse.com, Dino has not been extended or there are no contracts signed beyond next year. So yes, Syracuse could keep the status quo and they don't have to do anything this offseason. But then you've got a head coach. What was that?
It's the equivalent of someone leaving on a free, though.
Right, exactly. You're not going to be able to recruit at all when you don't have a contract for next year. So in some way, shape, or form, Wildtack has to give Babers, even if he wants to keep the status quo, there's going to be some sort of extension that he has to offer him. And I'm wondering, like, one of the things that Missouri did that was really interesting was that they gave Eli Drinkwitz an extension. But the extension was taking his buyout money and distributing that over a certain number of years. So we
really are turning into soccer, aren't we?
Yeah. So
we're trying to get financial fair play and just re-amortizing things here and there, just game and shuffling. And
yeah, I believe
it's suddenly the three of us are locked in.
Everybody just woke up. We're like, all right, let's go.
For those of you who aren't watching on the stream and are listening on your podcast platform of choice, Andy literally shuffled his chair forward and sat up straighter. It's like, all right, here we go.
Come on.
Yeah. So for context, the framework of this deal was that Drinkwitz had around a $20 million buyout remaining on his contract. Missouri did not want to pay that to fire him, but because of that, they had to keep him in some way and give him an extension. Otherwise, they had to pay the buyout in order to fire him early with 1 year left, which, shout out to his agent, fantastic buyout. So what they did was that they took that $20 million that they would have had to pay him anyways, and they spread that out over a period of years into a contract extension. So now if Missouri wants to fire him, it's a lot less than $20 million because a lot of that buyout money was taken in contract years put forward. Again, we don't know what Dino Babers' buyout is. I heard Stephen Godfrey I know this is kind of breaking. You should be a patron to Split Zone Duo. They talked about the Dino Babers buyout on the Split Zone Duo Patreon only show. It's $5 a month. The rumored buyout was unclear, but they said it would be more than 5 and less than 10. So if you want to fire Dino, it's going to cost you, let's just say, $7.5 million at the end of this year. Do you then take that $7.5 million and maybe add it for a 2-year deal, making, 4.1 whatever, or sorry, 3.75 whatever over 2 years as a quote unquote extension, and then make the buyout firing easier down the line? Or do you try to renegotiate the whole thing?
Yes. What I would say, if you're, and this is all the hypothetical, like we've gone full circle down the rabbit hole of like, this is the hypothetical. If we're finishing 6-6, 7-5, somewhere in that range, in all honesty, if we, from my perspective, I know you guys have both given yours, 7-5, you extend them for 2 years straight up. Like you're securing, like you're showing incremental improvement. The 2019 season, I think we all bought into the hype a little bit from the 10-3 season, but also those of us who have watched the program understand what happened, including the decimation of my beloved offensive line. However, and also the decimation of our quarterback because of said offensive line. But we've seen this coaching staff and this coach adapt and try and move on from where they were. 7-5 would be another testament to continuing that evolution and continuing to move towards something more consistent, something better. And in all honesty, I think the three of us would be of the ilk that a consistent 7-5 would be as much as we could expect from a Syracuse program. Of 7-5 with some spikes and some valleys and whatever would be, that's where we would expect in the current landscape of what the ACC and what college football is to be. I don't know if any one of the two of you has any other aspersions beyond that, or realistically with our administration and where we're at, if that feels like the ceiling for consistency.
I think the biggest issue that I have,
Christian's face, for anyone not watching the podcast, is if I'm reading it correctly, it's the I can't say no, but I really want to.
I think the easiest summation to this is that the ACC middle is just garbage. Like,
like it is for every sport.
The middle of like, but this is the crazy part, is that when Syracuse joined the ACC was a deep conference with a very clear bottom tier, and those bottom schools just kind of existed to be fed upon, and then everybody else at the top, like 8 to 9 schools, could be some version of good to very good. And Syracuse was that in football when they entered the conference, to be expected. But during that time period, we've seen the ACC just take a step back in a lot of ways. Like they've just gotten aggressively mediocre. And I think for my biggest issue is that if this is the way the ACC is going to be moving forward, like, I'm sorry, but I kind of expect Syracuse to be consistently in that upper middle portion. Like, you should have a head coach that at least gets you into the upper middle portion if you're not taking big swings trying to create the next Utah or Boise State type program, where you're trying to do something so radically different in order to rise to the top. And like, I think what we've seen from Dino and the coaching staff is that they're not really doing anything all that different from the rest of college football. The tempo thing was interesting when it started, but the tempo fad has almost completely gone away if you look at college football as a whole. And part of that is due to officials actively trying to control tempo more aggressively. Like, this is something that the NCAA has told its referees to do. So yeah, if Dino's not going to be different, he needs to be in that upper middle class pretty consistently. Because then that's team culture, that's recruiting, that's doing all the little things consistently. To borrow Dino's phrase, consistently good, not occasionally great.
Right.
I still go back to my point, which is as much as we want Syracuse to make a change, potentially, in order to bring that bring in that person who's going to consistently bring in 7, 8, 9 win seasons. And I think that's what Syracuse fans just want at this point. Is at this point after what's happened this past decade, to have a coach who can consistently bring in a 7, 8 win, 9 win season.
Basically,
Like
be Wake Forest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just don't think Syracuse financially has the strength to pull that off right now. And this probably could and should be a different conversation in 2 years once the dust settles, literally, from the finished renovation and construction jobs. And we ensure that our scoreboard isn't hanging by 2 cranes through a hole in the dome roof. So, like the, I hate to be a Debbie Downer on this, but I'm of the belief right now that there's legitimately no way, unless Syracuse doesn't make a bowl. If Syracuse makes a bowl, I don't think there's any financial way that Syracuse can keep Dina. And if Syracuse doesn't make a bowl, like there's still not a lot of financial wiggle room, but it makes the justification easier.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be an undercurrent for the entire season. Like a reminder that Wild Hack gave Dino the extension before the bowl game took place, that we're still talking about today. So if things go well, the expectation is going to be that he makes a decision in season like he did last time. So, and if things go bad, I think that the expectation is going to be pretty similar. So we'll see what happens here. I think it's a really fascinating through line to watch this season. And we'll see how it plays out. So guys, like we've kind of talked about the season. Gut check right here. What do you think the win total for this team is at the end of the year, realistically? Like I think 8 is on the table. I think the reality is that 7 is probably right where they end up. Like I think most people have it right that 7-5 is where this team ends the season. And it'll be interesting to see if they get there because they start hot and then fade, or they start well, get beat up, have to get healthy, and then finish strong. I think both of those options are on the table there. Steve, what are you feeling?
Almost exactly what you're talking about. Very much. I think 7-5 is the right number. 8-4 or 6-6 are possible. 5-7 is possible too, but I don't like. I feel like there's enough to this squad that they can get over that 5-win hump. Back-to-back bowl games is a solid spot for the program to be in. Yeah, that's where I'm predicting.
And to keep on trend with my projection, literally the 44% is probably Syracuse's projected win percentage against Purdue right now, in my book, even though Purdue is also in a kind of weird flux state in its program. And for me, that Purdue game is the difference between a 5-7 season and a 6-6 season for me. And it's as awful as that sounds. The 2 games that I have as losses, and that I'm assuming that you two are probably not going to have as losses, are Virginia Tech and Wake Forest. And the main reason is that Virginia Tech game is after that brutal stretch of 3 games and coming off a bye, which we know historically Dino Babers has not had his Syracuse teams gotten up to the typical football playing standard quickly enough in the game after the bye. Plus, that's against Virginia Tech in Blacksburg on a weekday night where that atmosphere is absolutely hostile even more so on a Saturday afternoon. And then the Wake Forest game, it feels like both of those teams are in a very similar position program-wise. And whenever those two teams match up in a matchup of similar team strength, it just always inherently feels like Wake Forest does the fundamentals a little bit better. And that in turn makes the Deanham Deacons win, essentially.
Fair.
Yeah.
And so that's where I go. And because of what we don't know about Purdue, that's why I go for between 5 and 7 and 6 and 6.
Nope, that 100% tracks. And I think that there's going to be, I think the weird thing about this season is that you're going to have a lot of fans that are all over this gamut as well, which I think goes back to the point of this is probably the most variable outcome season that Syracuse has had in a very long time, which is actually, in a perverse way, like, this is really exciting. Like, it's not like we're circling 1 or 2 games on the season. There's 5 or 6 games that you can circle and be like, these are all different kinds of inflection points for the team. And that's all you can really hope for if your team's not in the national title race. Like, you just want an interesting season, which I think we are about to embark on. That interesting season starts Saturday against Colgate. Again, not an FCS power, not a Villanova team that we should be all that concerned about. But again,
Please.
Christian is scarred from that Nova game. Again,
For
Colgate,
eternity.
Mm-hmm.
just to put it in perspective, Colgate is receiving no votes in any FCS poll. I checked like all of the other polls. They have no preseason All-Americans nationally or even in their conference first team. Like, this is not a good football team.
We should be okay.
We should be okay. So
We said that about Nova in 14 also.
we were stupid. Okay, we were stupid. But
Again, for those who are new to this podcast, to put into context, that Nova game was my first ever Syracuse football game in person.
Yeah.
It is the root of everything about Christian and that.
And yeah, it essentially explains who I am.
Yep.
Um,
That's like the Iowa game molding Casillo and I. So
yes.
Yep.
So real quick, what's one thing that you're looking for or looking forward to about the Colgate game? Christian, we'll start with you.
Who's starting?
I mean, technically, if you check noonsmagician.com, I will have a depth chart piece up tomorrow. It doesn't mean anything.
Also, given recent history, that depth chart piece might not go up until Tuesday night.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
But like
that depth chart is going to have more oars than a Minnesota football locker room.
Oh god, yeah,
that's going to have more oars than the crew team. Come on.
That's actually depressing. Honestly, like for the Colgate game, it is that who's starting? Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
And like it or not, whoever starts that Colgate game is going to start the Purdue game. It's very rare that Dino is going to make a starter change, like
week 1
within the first, over week 1 and 2, heading into week 3.
Unless it's a getting healthy thing or like availability thing,
or it's like
we don't see Allen, then sure. But
it's either going to be that, or it's going to be a situation like Miles Farmer gets acquainted on campus and all of a sudden he's destroying in practice.
Yep.
But like, we'll know who the starters are most likely for the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
After that Colgate game.
And I'm with you on that's the one thing to watch, because there's not a whole hell of a lot. The one thing I'm looking forward to watching is Syracuse soccer. Unless Pregler's got some other major thing to watch in Colgate outside of who's starting.
I was just going to say, like, I'm intrigued to see if Stephon Thompson plays any snaps. I think he's been so limited in preseason. I think if he is not 105%, it's really foolish to trot him out there. Use the Western Michigan game as his warm up, give him an extra, 6-7 days to get healthy. Because he takes that linebacking core to another level. Like, they can play without him. If they have him, that front seven can be super disruptive.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that'll be good. So I guess back to where we have to end the podcast, because we always do. Saw the first official game of the Syracuse football season on the other football. Syracuse soccer, the number one rated Syracuse soccer team, former national champions as of 2022, because, well, that's how we do. Trotted out a roster or a squad that I was not expecting. Looks like some guys are still getting their legs under them. Still just came out and thoroughly dismantled Providence 2-0. Scored on them early, got ahead, kind of, don't want to say coasted, but because they kept the pressure on the entire game, but it wasn't like they didn't need at any point to put it away. Very solid opening against a team that was receiving votes. They get another match against Binghamton this Monday. It should be an exciting season, and some of these transfers look extremely legit. Nick Halukian, who was the Michigan transfer, was all Big Ten last year. Looks the part. Susky from Boston College looks the part. All over the place, just energy out the yin yang. And then it's looking to be another MAC team where we just kind of reload. Like, I put in my season preview the stereotypical "we don't rebuild, we reload," and MAC really seems to do that. So hey, I'll take another season of that if that's what it comes to.
And that game's on ACC Network.
Yeah, Monday night is actually televised. So
yeah, it's on linear.
Yep. So if you don't know, every game is at least on ACC Network Extra. But I think 4 of them will be on ACC Network Prime.
I believe it's 5, actually.
Oh, nice.
If I remember correctly.
Very nice. So yeah,
be a good year.
Gonna be a good year.
Yeah. So at least one football team will be successful. The other, we will have to wait and see. But that is it for this week's edition of the Disloyal Idiots podcast. Thank you for tuning in and listening on the podcast provider of choice. We and the Fans First Sports Network really appreciate the support. Make sure that you like and subscribe in order to trick the Ottoman Empire into expanding. Trick the AI into expanding the Ottoman Empire. That's the line I normally say. Make sure that you, if you are watching this on Twitch, you also like and subscribe. Again, we do this every Sunday night around 8 p.m. and we live cast it so you can see all the things that we're pointing to on screen. You can see Christian's amazing facial reactions. It's just a good time if you join us on the Twitch stream. Thank you to our friends over at nunesmagician.com who, always are supporting us, and, you can still see some of our stuff over there. If you are watching or listening to us in the article, we do really appreciate the support. Again, guys, first week of the college football season is upon us. Next time we're talking, we are going to be breaking down actual live game film and previewing an actual opponent that you could play in next year's NCAA video game. Big things are happening. Go Orange.
Go Orange.
Go Orange.